help me welcome Consul General Claudia Velasco.
Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us. And of course, thank you very much for my dear colleague and friend, Mr. Celorio, for opening space in your very, very busy schedule. Well, let me introduce him. Currently serves as the principal legal service at the Mexican Minister of Foreign Affairs. As a career diplomat in the Mexican Foreign Service, he previously been appointed, served as Deputy Legal Advisor, Head of the Hispanic and Migratory Affairs Section at the Embassy of Mexico in Washington, D.C., Head of the Consular Assistant Department at the Consulate of Mexico in Sacramento, and Head of the Political and Economic Affairs Department at the Embassy of Mexico in Paraguay. Mr. Celorio holds a bachelor's degree in law from La Salle University, 3 master's degrees, legal sociology from the International Institute of Legal Sociology at Oñate, Spain, International Transaction and Comparative Law by the San Francisco University Law School, American Law by Houston University, and a diplomat in public administration for the Universidad Iberoamericana, Mexico City. Thank you again, dear College Celorio, for being here. You have the floor.
Good afternoon to all, and buenas tardes. It's a great honor and privilege to be here. I was jokingly with some of you, out of the Zoom little square. People tell me that I look better at the Zoom little conference. I don't know what to make of that. Thank you very much. This is my first trip to talk about this very interesting topic of opportunities, challenges, and comeback opportunities around the bilateral relations with the United States. And I wanted to make my first stop in Charlotte, in the Carolinas. I've been discussing in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs about the importance of the Carolinas for the bilateral relation, and we're very proud to have Consul General Velasco representing Mexico here. Thank you very much. It's such an honor to be here, and it's such an honor to be here as the first stop in my daily work. I'm in charge of international law, international treaties, international litigation. I travel to Europe mostly, and I'm very happy to be in Charlotte today. Thank you very much, Mr. Stando, for this opportunity. Thank you for putting this together, and of course to our consul, honorary consul. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all. The topic that we chose for this presentation, and I have around 20-25 minutes, and then I'm open to your questions, as hard and as uncomfortable as they could be. I'm ready to try to answer to them. I can always say, no hablo inglés. Resurging is stronger, hiding in Mexico-US relations in uncertain times. Don't mind that presentation that much. This is just some elements for you to navigate what I'm saying. US and Mexico, we share a border. We are going nowhere. We're going to be together, even if we don't like it. We're going to be together. There's a growing community of American citizens moving to Mexico. All the baby boomers, they might have a state one day in Jalisco. There's tens of thousands of people moving to Mexico. But not only baby boomers that are retiring, there's Americans moving into Mexico to invest, to work, to study. As you're well aware, there's a growing number, constant growing number of Mexicans coming into the US. The common notion is that they come here to work in low-skilled work, but that's not true. we come to work, but we also come to invest. There's even growing number of people making businesses and making job opportunities in the United States. But the most important thing, before I start my presentation, mixed families. There's myself, I'm married to an American. There's a growing community of mixed families, of Americans with Mexican parents, Mexicans with American parents, spouses of different countries, and that is the biggest strength that we have. So if we embrace the fact that we're together and there's nowhere to go but to grow together as a region, I think we're in a good pace, and I feel so encouraged to be among you because that's the vibe that I feel in Charlotte. You see, I perceive that you have this interest in investing in the region to grow together. In an ever-challenging world, the only thing we can do is to look at the opportunities and grow together. Between 2009 and 2017, during the Obama administration, the tone of the bilateral relation was to institutionalize what we did things. So let me explain a bit. Before we would try to work together, and there was always this idea of asymmetry, where the US would ask Mexico to do things, and Mexico would try to do them, and it was always the US again. 2017, 2018, we started looking at, let's do things together. The high-level economic dialogue, improving NAFTA, now the USMCA, the 21st Century Border Initiative, even in issues as difficult, as complex as the removal of Mexican nationals that have an undocumented status in Mexico, we institutionalize that to give more certainty in the way we work. And by building institutions, we were able to put a more balanced agenda in the interest of Mexico and the United States. You well know there's the Merida Initiative in a way to address insecurity, the armed violence in Mexico. We're thankful for the support of the US government for Mexico to better respond to the challenge of insecurity in Mexico. And a very important fact in those ages, recognizing immigrants' contributions to the United States. This is key, and I believe you are well aware of how important immigrants are for the United States. From low-skilled workers to DACA people, dreamers, there's a lot that immigrants can offer, and this is a common thread, a common idea that we need to keep when we're thinking on how to research post-pandemic. How can we take advantage of the capacity of these individuals, I'm referring to the dreamers, that are Americans by heart, even if they're Mexicans by birth. Between 2017 and 2021, during President Donald Trump's administration, we kept these institutions. It was a different style in dealing with the bilateral relation, privileging more the personal relations. President Trump would engage with the Mexican government on a personal level, he would make the decisions with his high-level officials, but we kept the institutions. The institutions, the bilateral institutions, didn't go anywhere, they just stayed there. A bit dormant, but they were there. And then we had a pandemic. 2020, and all of a sudden, we thought that we had big institutional scaffolding that could support our relation. And when the border was closed for non-essential workers, we realized the number of companies in Mexico that in the added value chain for the US and Canada, how important was Mexico for the United States in industry as sensitive as the defense industry. So the pandemic helped us realize how important we are for each other in all ways. Not only for the industry, and as I mentioned, for the added value chains, but for families. The border was closed, I'm talking about the land border, was closed for non-essential World Health Organization. I wanted to mention the pandemic as an opportunity, as a way of explaining that even if we are optimistic, that we're in a good path, that we like each other, that we can work together, we can have things like this, like a pandemic, or like the invasion of Russia and Ukraine that is making some people come to Mexico to cross into the United States. There's always challenges, but what we need to keep in mind is how fast we can react. What are the common elements that we have? And as tough as a conversation could be, we are ready to address it. And in this way, let me enter to the core of my conversation. Here. Preventing together the illicit trafficking of firearms. There's two common challenges nowadays that we're facing. The illicit trafficking of substances, guns, and people. Is one industry with the same actors that resort in one same tool, and this is firearms. Military style firearms. Between 500,000 and 800,000 weapons. Firearms from all kinds, from a handgun to a 50 caliber sniper rifle to AR-15 and all the guns that you see in Netflix, in the Narco series, are entering into Mexico annually, every year. Just to keep something in mind, a gun that is well kept, as long as it has ammunition, is still useful. So for the last 20 years, if you have 500,000 of guns entering Mexico, we have 10 million guns, firearms, into Mexico. What happened? This is the vice cycle. A drug cartel or a criminal will get the guns in the United States. ATF states that between 70 to 90% of the guns found in crime scenes in Mexico come from the United States, can be traced to the United States through the serial number. The criminals with that firepower, they're able to threaten. It's not only the killing or the hurting or the destroying, it's the threatening. When they show a video with the kind of firepower that they have, they erode our social fabric. Let me say it openly, they make corruption happen more easily. Either you accept the money or we kill you. With that firepower, they're able to get terrain against the other criminal organizations to smuggle people and substances. They're able to produce more drugs. Those drugs come into US cities to be consumed by our youth and our adults also in the United States. Those drugs make money. With that money, they can buy more firepower, and the cycle continues. And now these criminal organizations are engaging in other criminal activities, migrant smuggling. We have around 7,000 people crossing irregularly every day between Mexico and the United States. And they are smuggled by people with these heavy guns. So what we're doing now? President López Obrador has this phrase of abrazos no balazos, meaning hugs no bullets, and he doesn't mean that we're going to go hug the criminals. But it's a way explaining that armed violence cannot be combated with armed violence. If we shoot the criminals are going to shoot us. We don't want to be engaged in the shooting. We need to find smarter ways of finishing armed violence. One of the actions that I'm involved in is a litigation. My boss, Secretary Brard, Minister of Foreign Affairs, asked me to, together with my team, to figure out a way of how we could stop incidents to happen again like the one that happened 2 years ago. It's going to be 3. In a Walmart in El Paso, Texas. An individual bought a gun imported from Romania. He bought it online. It's similar to an AK-47. It's a Vaser 10. Got it online, picked it up in Dallas with his brother's credit card, I would say. Drove from Dallas to El Paso, killed 22 people. all of Hispanic origin. He was inspired by white nationalism theories. He actually uploaded a manifesto saying, we need to stop the invasion of Hispanics into the US. My instruction was, we need to stop that from happening. And in the process of, what are we gonna do to stop this? Because of our experience in the US, we thought, what about a tort law lawsuit, as a civil litigation against Walmart? The Mexican government wasn't there, we don't have standing, against the aggressor, challenging, against the company, because they didn't take the due care, the diligence to stop this from happening. I'm talking about this very superficially. But in the process of structuring our complaint, we found that 500,000 of guns enter Mexico, and the majority of them are sold in the same indiscriminated way that this other gun that was used in the Walmart in El Paso was used. So we put together a team, and we filed a lawsuit August the 4th, 2021, in the second anniversary of the attack in El Paso. Let me state clearly, this lawsuit is not against Americans, it's not against the US government, it's not against the Second Amendment. We're a foreign government. We wouldn't dare, because we don't want that to happen to us. We wouldn't dare to challenge a foreign law. We respect the domestic laws of the United States. But in that respect, we're resorting to the US legal system. We filed a lawsuit in Massachusetts, in Boston, in the federal court, in English, the language of the defendants, under US law, the legal system of the defendants, in a federal court. We're going to their home court to say, defendants, companies who are sued, the way you conduct business, your negligence, breaking the law, and I'll explain more in detail, the way you sell your guns, advertise them, manufacture them, actively facilitate the illicit traffic of your product into Mexico. And you would ask, like, why going to the origin and not to the point of sale? There's tens of thousands of stores in the southern border of the US that sell weapons. Because in order to make a real change, we need to go to the origin of a polluted river. We're already doing things at the end of the river by prosecuting the criminals. In the middle of the river, we're working with customs to stop the flow, but we need to go to the origin to stop the dumping of this toxic waste, that is, these military-style weapons. What is that we're claiming? Defendants are hurting the Mexican government by not taking the care to stop the straw purchasers, multiple buyers, selling out of inventory, cartels can access your guns. These companies that we're suing know that their products end in Mexico and are used by criminals. Not only, as I mentioned, because of Netflix narco series, it's reports by the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, ATF, reports by United Nations. They know. And they know that their product ends in Mexico because of the tracing of their product. The tracing of their product from the criminal scenes to the point of manufacturing is available for these companies. So what we're saying is, and I'm oversimplifying this, knowing that your product ends in the hands and is being used to commit crimes, you do nothing to monitor, sanction, and make changes to stop this. The lawsuit was filed August the 4th. The defendants presented their arguments. They claim that they enjoy an immunity. There's a federal statute that offers them, we claim as the plaintiffs, that is limited immunity for acts, for harms occurred out of the United States jurisdiction. There's no extraterritorial effects of that statute. That's our claim. And they also say that the government of Mexico doesn't have standing because there's no way of connecting what happens in Massachusetts with what happens in Mexico. We filed our reply. Interesting to note, We got the support through amicus briefs of 14 state attorney generals led by the Attorney General of Massachusetts. 26 district attorneys filed an amicus as well, and some experts in international law, experts in US law, and organizations both in Mexico and the United States that represent victims of gun violence. Before answering your questions and reacting to your comments, let me stress again about this idea of Americans going into Mexico, Mexicans coming to the US, and the mixed families. Armed violence is hurting everybody. It's hurting Mexicans in Mexico. It's hurting Americans in Mexico. Somebody mentioned about Cancun. Cancun is becoming a violent scene because gangs are shooting each other with firearms that shouldn't exist in Mexico. Why? Because in Mexico there's only one store where you can get guns, managed by the Secretary of Defense. Only one store. And after getting the permit, you can only get guns with a very low caliber, not the military-style weapons. So if it's hurting everybody, why not doing something about it? And this is what we're doing. With all respect to the US legal system, US laws, the politics, the social contract in the US mandates that somebody can buy guns in the United States and then use it for the activities they decide to do it. That is the US. The social contract in Mexico says that there's one store and you cannot, as a civilian, buy, bear, use military-style weapons that are reserved only for the use of the armed forces. So we have two social contracts. What we claim is that the defendants, the companies, knowing about this difference, facilitate through their negligence the illicit traffic of guns into Mexico. We as a government will continue working in our customs to stop the flow. We will continue prosecuting criminals, traffickers, but we also want the corporations to be held accountable. If there's going to be a trade of weapons, and we're not against the commerce of guns and firearms, that's a decision of the US as a whole, as a nation. But if there has to be one, it has to be transparent, responsible, and accountable. And I feel very optimistic that with this vibe that I feel in Charlotte, of a region that we can do things together, we can engage in this conversation that might be uncomfortable about corporate responsibility and how much a corporation could do to prevent that 500,000 of guns enter Mexico and that we live, and I assure you, I'm from Mexico City, in a constant fear of being shot. Thank you very much for your attention.
I'm Mike Hawley on the board of the World Affairs Council. We're going to get questions from as many of you as we can. We also are going to get questions from our contingent from Queen's University and John Catton over here, a student at University of North Carolina, Charlotte. And so if you want in on this conversation, get your hand up and we're going to fill the time. We will come at actually, Alejandro, the first question is going to come from Chase Saunders, who's a judge here, retired judge. And I think, without getting into the merits of the lawsuit that you just mentioned, could you talk just briefly, before Chase asks his question, about the overall intent of this? To me, it seems like a message that your country is sending to ours, that there are things going on domestically here. We have domestic policies, but there are impacts beyond just the domestic impacts. And I think you've talked from time to time too about the internationalization of legal principles. And so maybe if you could give us a little context, regardless of the merits of that case and what might come from it.
Yeah.
And then we'll go to you, Chase.
Thank you very much, Mike. So this is a transboundary tort lawsuit. It's the merit is that we are being harmed because of the negligent and illicit conduct of the corporations we are suing. This is not a political stunt. We really have suffered harm in the amount of 6% of our GDP. We're going to prove that in court. because the government of Mexico has lost lives. People have been hurt. We spend in funerary costs, psychological, medical. Helicopters have been shot down. Like these guns that shouldn't be in Mexico. Now, it has a legal objective. What we want these companies to change the way they conduct their business. We want them to be more careful, more diligent, and perhaps innovate in the way they design and advertise their weapons. There's weapons that are called jefe de jefes, and they're found in narco houses in Mexico, or handguns that have Aztec symbols. So it will be interesting in discovery to see if the companies made a corporate decision about a growing consumer market in Mexico, and then they decided to sell them out. But that is a fact. Now, in terms of that externalization, the attorneys here that are interested in the law will get interested in this. Our claim is that the federal statute there's a presumption against the extraterritoriality of that statute. PLCAA, the Protection of Lawful and Commerce Arms Act, we claim that doesn't have an extraterritorial effect. Therefore, the companies shouldn't enjoy immunity from harm that happens beyond the U.S. jurisdiction.
Yeah, this is not going to turn into a legal seminar. We're going to hear from Chase on this, and then we're heading for things like energy policy and what President Lopez Obrador is doing in that space relative to global warming and so on. Chase.
This is not a legal question. This is a question of sustainability of a governing model. There have been a number of revolutions over the past 200 years in Mexico where generally one group prevailed because they had most of the weapons. Now that weapons have become democratized all over Mexico, what is the sustainability of the existing model without having another revolution internally?
Thank you very much. We shouldn't have that many weapons in Mexico. We shouldn't, because the law keeps being the same. And I'll just give you an additional comment. These are criminals with weapons. They're not revolutionaries. They're not insurgents. They don't want to get power. They want to get money. They don't want to become the government. This is not an insurgency like what we saw in Central America in the 80s. These are criminals. Those criminals shouldn't have these weapons. And because they're criminals, we need to arrest them and prosecute them under the presumption of innocence, due process. But how can we arrest somebody that is pointing at us a caliber 50 rifle? So the sustainability of what we're saying, what is happening, those guns shouldn't be in Mexico. Unless there's a change in our laws that won't happen, because our social contract mandates that. We shouldn't have that kind of weapons. And if you see, we're talking about what happens in Mexico. We're not questioning what happens in the US. It's just the negligence in the way they sell. The amount of profit of the illicit traffic of guns is around $250 million a year. It's a minor profit if you compare it to what you can do with the legal exports, because the companies we're suing, they already make a lot of money selling to other countries and selling internally in Mexico. They don't, in the US, they don't need a Mexican market that is illicit. But
Yeah, so we're going to go to the Queens College table next, but before that, can you talk a little bit about what the President's plan is in the energy space, the restructuring in the energy space that is either going to have a positive or negative effect on global warming?
Thank you very much. That goes beyond my topics, but something to see. President Lopez Obrador, he calls it the fourth transformation, like a revolution, non-armed revolution. He's changing a lot of things, and one thing that he is trying to do is to have more certainty in terms of energy production, transmission, and the trade of energy. And the idea of the Mexican government is to resort more on the public company, the government company. So we moved for decades into the privatization of energy. Now we're looking back into building and strengthening our government company without taking the private sector away. So it's not about taking the private investments away for the government company. Is trying to balance it better. Now, That initiative is still discussed in Congress. We'll see what happens, because we're a democracy, and in Congress, the position might have some changes, some tweaks. Now, I'll end with this. There is a strong commitment of the Mexican government and President López Obrador with actions to avoid climate change or to reduce it to the maximum capacity. So we're going to keep working in alternative energies. We just want that the alternative energies don't become that expensive and that profitable for the private sector against the economy of the regular Mexican citizen.
Thank you.
Queen's University. Yes, sir. Tell us your name and speak loudly with your questions. Thanks.
Hi. So first, thank you so much for your presentations. My name is Hugo. I'm from Queen's University of Charlotte and bachelor's in Immigrants. So I was wondering, first, Queen's University is giving me the opportunity next month to go to Washington, D.C. to participate in the simulation of the organization of the American states, what's commonly referred to as the OAS. Mexico being such a big player in the hemisphere in the Americas, I was wondering what would be your stance on the OAS as a whole? What would be the advantages, the drawbacks? Would you say the OAS is an efficient organization? And maybe regarding firearms or drug trafficking, would you say the OAS could take a good recommendation regarding all those issues in the hemisphere? Thank you so much.
Yeah, good question. The Organization of American States, as you all know, is a club of countries of all the region but Cuba. And Venezuela cannot leave because it owns some of the fees. What is happening now? The OAS, the Secretary General, that in a way is the employee of our countries, of our governments, he's an employee, he is assuming a position of the Latin American president. And that is making very complex the way we address issues like migration, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Honduras, Cuba. The OAS should maintain the way it should be, it's meant to be. It's a system to solve problems in the region. It's a system that we need to have because the US and Canada are there. Latin America, even if we don't speak the same language, we're in the same hemisphere. And we're together in this, and we have stakes in everything that happens in the region. So I'm optimistic that with the leadership of Mexico and the leadership of the US, the OAS will go back to what it should be, a forum to solve problems.
Going to go to John Gallus and then to John Cadden. John.
Mexico has a significant resource in oil that it transports to the United States. The U.S. is in need of more oil after shutting off the supply from Russia. That might be a strong bargaining chip for getting the United States to act on weapons that you're discussing. Has that been contemplated or considered?
Thank you for the question. There is a strategy in what we're doing. Even though this has political and diplomatic and bilateral implications, and we learned this from the USMCA. When we negotiated the modernization of USMCA, everything was on the table, but migration was always intoxicating the other discussions. We don't want the illicit traffic of guns to intoxicate our bilateral relation. So what we're doing, we're working very well with the US to prevent and combat illicit traffic of weapons. I didn't mention in detail, but for us, this is our priority. And for the US, the US government is becoming something important to talk about. How can we work together, US and Mexico government, to stop the illicit traffic of guns? This is the governmental discussions. We're looking at the corporations. They've been profiting from this for decades, and they have the opportunity to get involved in the solution. Now, we don't want the illicit traffic of guns to become a political issue between Mexico and the US. But as a matter of fact, without guns, the issues that we're facing will be easier to solve. If you think about it, without guns, perhaps there will be less violence, less displacement, less irregular migration towards the US from Mexico and the region. Without guns, less facility to produce illicit substances. Without guns, without guns, without guns. It is about time to work for no guns in Mexico.
John Cadden, University of North Carolina, Charlotte.
Hello. Thank you so much for taking up the time to what is your AMLO's solution to that problem of taking out not just the big guy, but trying to stabilize the situation there? My second question is involving the pensions, the presidential pensions. There's a lot of debate in your country over the presidential pension. What is your opinion, and what do you think the solution is for that as well? Thank you.
Presidential pensions, like when they retire and they get money?
Yes, like Salinas' pension.
We promised they weren't going to be easy questions for you.
This is a no English answer. And I would like to have a more optimistic tone. Don't feel that I'm a downer. The pensions. I mean, it's politics. Personally, I mean, they get their pension from a federal funds, their TSP or whatever it's called, and that's it. Now, if they have other sort of pensions, they should be prosecuted. They don't enjoy immunities. So, but that's a decision from the Attorney General that is autonomous from the federal government. Now, I believe it's important to talk about these things because it's taxpayers' money at the end. So my opinion is that if they should be prosecuted, they should be prosecuted under the presumption of innocence. The fact that somebody is prosecuted doesn't mean they're guilty. You know? And if they're not guilty, they're not guilty. Now, what is President Lopez Obrador doing? If we just engage in killing the criminals, and again, by law, we cannot just storm and kill. It's like, imagine the situation in Mexico is like a SWAT situation throughout the Mexican territory. Even the SWAT team, they don't enter and kill. They respond with the monopoly of use of force, and I think it's the continuum of the use of force. If they are attacked, they can react. But it's a SWAT situation. We cannot kill only. But if we were only to behead the organizations, more heads will come out, and then it becomes very chaotic. What President Lopez Obrador is offering is to go to the root causes. I think it's a good opportunity to talk about root causes, because root causes of violence, root causes of migration, these are the two big topics in President Lopez Obrador agenda. With migration, if we only concentrate in contention at the border, we see the drama that we see in Bacala, of people trying to cross and they cannot, so they're in camps. Contention doesn't work. It's the same with guns. Contention. We'll just have to have guns. If we build a wall, if Mexico builds a wall, and if we build it, we'll pay. Against the US, against the illicit traffic of guns. We'll just have guns in this side and migrants on the other side. Well, the proposal of President Lopez Obrador is to go to the root causes. So what he's doing is, in addition to prosecuting the criminals, is to offer opportunities to the youth. Because these criminals resort on the lack of opportunities of our youth. So what President Lopez Obrador is doing, and this is, he likes Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, this idea of opportunities, infrastructure, is direct assistance to the youth. I have an individual, a woman, an attorney. She was going to drop law school because she didn't have a chance. So through this program, Jóvenes Construyendo el Futuro, Youth Building the Future, she came to my office as my apprentice. 2 years later, she's director of international litigation. She got the opportunity. That lady, if she hadn't had the chance, she could have easily resorted on crime to provide for her family. So, is this going to be solved tomorrow? No. But there was the need to start one day, and we're doing it.
Is there another hand up? We're going to close. Let me go back to the student at Queens, and then what I think we're going to run out of time, and I wanted to get a question from Larry Dagenhart. We opened with a question from a lawyer, and we're going to close with one from him. And Larry is a longtime supporter of the World Affairs Council, and frankly, this is the first time we've seen the likes of him and many of the others of you here. So thank you very much for coming. Yes, sir. Quickly.
Thank you for being here today.
plan with Venezuela is to encourage diplomatic solution between the government and the opposition. And we've been very successful in that. The Norwegian government with the Dutch government put together this table of negotiation in Mexico City, and we are trying to keep hosting these kind of conversations. In terms of oil, we have our own dynamic with the US. We just bought, Pemex just bought Deer Park, and it's talking about Mexican investment in the US. We bought a refinery there. And I think our relation in terms of energy and oil has its own challenge and a lot of opportunities to grow.
So we have time for Luther Moore, and then Larry Dagenhart, and then we're gonna wrap it up. Luther.
I would like to be a tourist in Mexico. Is it safe for me to go? Yes or no?
Yes.
Why is it safe? It's not what we read in the Wall Street Journal.
Where do you want to go? That would be the counter answer. And I'll explain.
Mexico City.
Mexico is a huge country and has all these places. We'll go to Cancun, and there's a flight, right? That's from here to Cancun. But because a lot of people are going to Cancun, and not Cancun, Tulum. Now, let me share some details. Tulum, a wonderful resort that it was supposed to be very natural and hippie kind of place. Well, now it's a place for raves, these electronic house music events. And the events are advertising what's up, and a lot of American youth and Europeans go there to consume drugs. Drugs bring people with guns. Guns, violence, shootings, killing. Now, sadly, a resort that should be enjoyable not only for foreigners, but for Mexicans, is becoming a place that I wouldn't recommend. So, Cancun, not totally. Mexico City and other places, they're open for business. And I assure you, I've been in Mexico City for 4 years after being abroad for 16, posted in different locations. You feel safe. It's just like being in Chicago or in LA. There's places you don't go to. They're just like, I'm not gonna go there. Now, in general, this is an invitation for, look at our honorary consul and our consul general for information of other places. Explore Mexico. Mexico is ready to welcome you, and you'll feel safe and you'll enjoy it.
Thank you. Actually, we're closing the thank you. Closing with a question from two lawyers, because Luther is a lawyer as well. Larry, you got the floor.
Thank you very much. Good to be here again. About 10 years ago, I heard a specialist on Mexico say that Mexico is becoming more American and America is becoming more Mexican. Has that trend continued over the past decade?
Yes, in all ways, and I'll tell you something. Being the father of Mexican Americans, I tell my son that he is a USMCA kid because he's built in America with Mexican parts. and that is true. I think you would think more American, and immediately the stereotype of American, or more Mexican, the stereotype of Mexican. No, the values. And I'll tell you one example. I think the United States, Americans in general, are warmer. They're warmer, they're more Latinos now. I don't know if it's because of the guacamole or the music, but there's a sense of the values of the Mexican, the Latino families. Families closer. That's just one example. In Mexico, what we needed to learn from the US is that we can make it. There's an ever notion in Mexico, and I mean, we got invaded several times, and there's always, they're telling us that we cannot. But this idea that is in Mexico, you live it as immigrants. If you work hard, you'll make it. And then you hold accountable your authorities. And you build democracy. So in terms of values, I think we are intertwining our societies. And as a region, instead of Mexico being more American, American being more Mexican, I think we're becoming what we're used to. We should be North Americans as a region. And the competition shouldn't be among us, it's the world. Together, we have this opportunity.
Great way to close, and Alejandro, thank you. Before you leave today, I want you to meet Concha Becker and Klaus Becker, if you've not met them. They have built a wonderful American out of Mexican and German parts, and it's pretty phenomenal. Anyway, Wayne Cooper.
Of the World Trade Association, the director of the World Trade Association, we appreciate for your presentation and your
Can you move to the left, Can you move to the left with it, so we can get photos of you? Sorry.
Sure.
And this is this is in Spanish. It's México frente al mundo, los discursos que hicieron historia. This is a collection of speeches by women diplomats and men diplomats in Mexico. Let me highlight the importance of women in diplomacy. Consul General Claudio Blasco. I'll offer it to the council, and perhaps if you're interested, this is what Mexico has said to the world. This is our position.
Well, thank you all very, very much. Please help us promote global understanding and by becoming a member of the World Affairs Council and supporting international education. If you're interested in learning more about the membership, please stop by our desk or just see any of us. We're glad to help. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you at the next event.
Thank you.